Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and it's been a bit since I've done my last fleet composition video, but with that being said, the most requested and liked suggestion from the last one was from Rumpelstiltskinson for a jack-of-all-trades fleet that's basically capable of dealing with anything that it may come across. So that's what we're going to focus in on, with fleets focused on having two different sizes of crews, a smaller example at about 5 people, and a larger example with 15. But before we start talking ships, we need to kind of identify what types of jobs I'll be considering here, which I'm including as cargo, exploration, combat, bounty hunting, salvage, and search and rescue. I'm not including things like science or filming or racing or mining because those are all very specialized tasks to the ships that you have in mind. And to clarify, when I'm saying salvage, I mean that more as a cargo mechanic, basically taking goods from wrecks that you find, not actually processing the materials on board like something a reclaimer would do. So in our smaller scale example, we're going to be looking at two ships that I think are capable of being the centerpieces of your fleet, with the first being the Cutlass. The Cutlass, with the variants that they have, are capable of swapping out different components to take on different jobs, which makes it for a very interesting piece to build your fleet around. Now, in a perfect world, you can add an auto dock from a red, you can add 1 to 2 holding cells from the blue, and then you have a very well-rounded ship in the Cutlass Black that can do very many different roles, especially being like cargo and salvage and bounty hunting and search and rescue, and thanks to the upgraded weaponry with the rework, some combat as well. Now, we do need to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, the fact that we're not sure how the rework is going to impact the flexibility of the components between the variants, but I think it's relatively fine to assume that we're going to be able to do some level of pick and swap. Now, if you can only add in one component without sacrificing too much cargo, I'm opting for the auto dock from the Cutlass Red and dropping the bounty hunting portion of this because the next ship coming along is going to be the Avenger Stalker. The Stalker's a relatively fast and agile ship. It's got decent weaponry and it brings along holding cells as well as some distortion cannons that kind of helps it to fulfill the combat and the bounty hunting needs for this small fleet. Up next is kind of the other centerpiece that I would claim, and that's going to be the Freelancer Dur. The Dur can take on the exploration capabilities through its onboard scanners and sensors and brings a pretty decent ability to haul cargo while doing that. Now, you could technically have the turret for additional firepower, but I envision the Cutlass being the better bet for this as far as the workhorse and kind of the gunboat role. So I would have the Freelancer Dur rolling solo with 1 person in the Stalker and 2 people in the Cutlass. Now, if you're counting along, that means you have 1 person left, which I'm opting to put into a Hornet Tracker. Now, this person would be able to help with some scanning and exploration ability, would help to keep an eye out for inbound threats, and would help to scan for people in need of help, for like I guess more of a search and rescue type of role, and then would also be able to effectively participate in combat with 3 size 3 weapons on board and missiles, all while helping to keep that fleet organized. So what you end up with is the cargo being covered by the Cutlass and the Freelancer, combat being covered by the Cutlass, Avenger, and Hornet, exploration with the Freelancer and the Hornet, and search and rescue being handled by the Cutlass, and the Cutlass and the Freelancer able to deal with the salvage that you may come across. Now, it's a very well-rounded fleet that should take on a lot of different roles. Now, in addition to that, though, we're looking at 3.0 and beyond, so ground transportation is going to be important to be able to facilitate, and when you have a Freelancer and a Cutlass, both of which are capable of carrying a Nox or a Dragonfly, you can expand your horizons a bit. Now, you can obviously plug and play a few ships here that I think will maybe tweak this fleet to your liking, but this is the optimal fleet that I'm opting for in this setup. Now, for the larger 15-person fleet, we're going to have 1 large centerpiece ship as well, with that being the Carrack. The Carrack is an exploration ship at heart, so we know it's going to do well at that, but it brings some other goodies along too, including a medical bay on board and a small scout ship, both of which should open up some search and rescue options. The Carrack is also large enough to carry cargo that you may take from the beginning of your journey or that you find along the way, and with some decent sized turrets you can help to protect the other ships in your fleet. So I personally envision 6 total people on the Carrack, with 2 people in turrets, 2 people on the bridge, 1 person acting as a roamer doing engineering work or medical responsibilities, and 1 person that's ready to deploy in the scout ship to help with combat, search and rescue, or exploration needs. And that doesn't even cover the fact that it comes with a rover ready, so you can actually deploy it on planetside and do that type of exploration as well. The second ship in this fleet is going to depend on how you think you'd prefer to spend your time. For example, if you want the ability to haul cargo and carry salvage, focus more on exploration and combat, then I think the Constellation Andromeda is a very wise choice. It's got powerful pilot-controlled weapons, it's got a deployable fighter, it's got 2 decent-sized turret locations, and relatively controllable ship for the size that it is. And I think the Constellation ends up covering a lot of the roles that you may want to take on. However, if you value cargo and salvage more than the combat and the exploration, then I think the Drake Caterpillar is the ship for you to add into this fleet. It's going to be a little bit less combat capable, and I envision it as being less of an explorer than the Constellation would be, but it carries more cargo, and we're going to get a lot of versatility through modules down the line. And it's also got a dedicated tractor station with side opening doors that give you the ability to grab salvage and cargo and bring them on board without having to even exit the ship. Both of these options are going to have 4 people on board, with the Andromeda having 1 pilot, 2 turret gunners that can probably hang out on the bridge to help facilitate other operations when they're not actually in combat, and a P-52 pilot who's going to deploy when needed, and otherwise would be acting as a roamer around the ship if they're not needed to be out flying around on their own. Now, the Caterpillar, we've got a pretty similar lineup with a dedicated pilot, 2 turret gunners, although they're going to take on other responsibilities like scanning as well, and 1 person who acts as a roamer on the ship, but is ready to jump on the tractor control bridge when it's needed to actually pull things into your ship. But regardless of what you pick between the Constellation or the Caterpillar for that second ship, I think the third one you're going to end up going with is going to be the Cutlass with 2 people on board, basically in the same configurations that I mentioned in the small fleet example, because that makes it able to take on a lot of different roles, and is a lighter ship that's capable of more dogfighting than the bigger ones in this fleet. That being said, I don't think there's really enough agility in this fleet to be able to deal with smaller threats in larger numbers. So in order to chase down and really dogfight, I'm opting for 1 smaller and faster fighter like the Sabre, and 1 more heavily armed and armored brawler that's still capable of dogfighting like the Super Hornet to help keep your team safe. And finally, with a larger fleet, you're more likely to be targeted by larger enemies. So while it's not going to be the toughest thing in the world, the Gladiator makes a good single-person option to bring a little bit more firepower through missiles and torpedoes. Now, there was a few alternatives that you could consider as well, including dropping 1 person from the Caterpillar if you ended up going that way, and you could bring along a Vanguard Harbinger instead of the Gladiator. And that means you're going to be bringing along good-sized torpedoes, good forward-facing weaponry, a rocket turret, and is a long-range vehicle. So you can deal with bigger threats. The other option is if you prefer a lot of missiles over torpedoes, then you could probably bring along the Freelancer Miss, and that would allow you to send a bunch of missiles at many different targets should you be engaged by a larger group of smaller fighters. So what you get in that fleet has already been mentioned, but basically you get exploration being covered really well by the Carrack, cargo through the Carrack, Connie, Caterpillar, I guess whichever you choose, and Cutlass, all of which are also able to bring ground vehicles along. Combat through basically a lot of those options, bounty hunting from the Cutlass, salvage on the cargo ships, and search and rescue with the Cutlass and the Carrack. It's a really well-rounded fleet that I think would be very capable in roles and basically very able to defend itself as well. So before we wrap this up, I've got 2 things to mention. First off, if you guys have fleets that you want me to break down and discuss, please add them to the comments, and basically the one that ends up being liked the most is going to be the next one that I do. Secondly, my organization PXP is currently running a contest to win a 2-pack of Noxes, as well as a few alternative prizes like RSI gift cards. It's basically a pick of the 3.0 release date type of contest. So in order to participate, there's a link in the description that's going to take you to the information page, but basically you have about 5 days left to get signed up, so if you're interested, get to it. So that's it for this video. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for more, and have a great day. Take care.